wealthy is not all rainbows and unicorns. Tune in for the dark side of being a millionaire.
Brian, I am excited about this because I'm hoping it can be a cautionary tale. I'm hoping that it will be something that our folks who either have reached that status, that millionaire status, or the folks that are aspiring to get there, I'm hoping that we can lay some foundational groundwork so that they don't find themselves on the wrong side of the equation. But before we jump into that, if you are just tuning in with us for the first time ever, we would love for you to be part of the tribe. So right now, subscribe to the channel so you can stay updated with all the information we're putting out there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have this notion that when you're wealthy, successful, that you're happy and you don't have, the insecurities, you don't have the unhappiness. But I got to tell you, there's a lot of wealthy people that are rudderless, purposeless, and they just don't have it all put together. And that's what we wanted to cover today, Bo, was kind of help people be on the right track, but to kind of set the table. I thought and I've used this before because I think it's a great quote. Jim Carrey, everybody knows. Jim Carrey, there's so many stories. He says half of them are true, half of them are false or whatever, but there's always that famous one where he wrote himself this check when he was dirt poor for $20 million. And then he was able to cash it. So this is definitely somebody who had an aspiration, reached goals, tippity top of success. And then when he's at the top of the mountain, he does share this quote.
He says, I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can see that it's not the answer.
Yeah, wealth, money, the resource, the tool that we have, it is just one facet of it. It's a very important one. You obviously, there's also the quote, I've been poor and I've been rich. Rich is better.
That's right. Yep.
But it's still one of those things where if you don't have a purpose, if you don't know the why, if you don't fill in the blanks of all the other facets of your life, you'll figure out that this is not the end all. So we wanted to help you, load you up. We'll talk about where millionaires struggle, their biggest pitfalls. We're going to talk about how you can understand your relationship with money. And then last, we'll show you how to do it better so that you can actually have purposeful wealth that also creates happiness and fulfillment.
So let's talk about some of these dark sides. Let's talk about some of these millionaires that are unhappy. Here's the first thing that we notice about millionaires that are unhappy, they're not satisfied. They hate their jobs.
Yeah, obviously, we love our job, but there are a lot of people, and I often wonder, like the doctor who said, or the student that wants to be a doctor, not because they're trying to save lives, but because, man, I hear doctors make all the money, ton of money, and these other things. If and this falls into what is stress, anxiety. We live in a society now that seems like it is loaded up with this stuff. The research shows 68% of high-income individuals making over $250,000, they report feeling stressed out at work regularly.
And you can compare this to only 38% of those who make between $50,000 and $75,000 that say they regularly feel stressed, and 47% under $50,000 of income that say that they feel stressed. Now, don't mishear me. I would argue, right? Like I'm stressed sometimes at work. I love what I do. But sometimes it gets stressful, and so you may be saying, okay, well, hey, if you make under $250,000 or over $250,000, you're probably in a job where you have more burden, more responsibility, but it's something you ought to be mindful of. If you find yourself having the Sunday scaries every week where you're like, oh my gosh, I just can't wait for the weekend, I got to get out of this. It's not uncommon for that level of stress to bleed into all the other financial areas of your life to where you really do begin to resent and hate the thing that is bringing the dollars into your household.
Well, I think stress, because I'll be self-reflective on this, is that it also creates bad lifestyle decisions. Because money is just one facet of your life. Your physical health is another level of wealth that you can have. And I like last week, I think I've shared on the show, We practice the intermittent fasting, where we have the periods where we're eating, we have the periods we're not eating, and it works really great. We have our black coffee as kind of the one loophole, but if I have like a bad morning where the kid, my daughter didn't get to school easily, me and my wife aren't connecting, I pull into the Sonic. And I load up on all the carbs of the tater tots and everything. And that's the stress is making me make bad decisions, or it's influencing me. It also impacts your sleep. So if you don't have stress under control, even though you have all the fruits of success, it can lead to negative physical things as well.
You're not alone in that. 46% of people say that because of stress, they either overeat or eat unhealthily due to that. 29% of folks say that they either started drinking or started drinking more because of stress. 77% of people experience stress that ends up affecting their physical health. So now we're talking about actual manifestations in your body, in your health from stress. And 48% of folks say that they have trouble sleeping due to stress. So even if you are one of these Americans in these higher paying jobs, or maybe you're just in a lower paying job, but you are constantly stressed to the max because of that, recognize there are some unintended consequences and some ramifications of that down the road, that even though you may be driven and even though you may be pushing towards these financial goals, you really have to sit back and measure, okay, at what cost? What is the pursuit of this costing me? And ultimately, is it really worth it?
Well, and that leads to, because I think a lot of us, when we think about success and wealth, you think about like the C-suite executives.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so interesting to me when I saw this stat that CEOs struggle with actual treatable depression at 2 times the rate of the general population. You can't tell me that doesn't fall back to that stress. I mean, this is people that you would think would be top of the food chain, feeling really good because they're probably flying on the private jets and living the lifestyle that we all aspire to. And then you find out that they have double the rates of depression. Then you find out that the kids, because rich kids are more depressed and have more anxiety than middle or lower income peers. You see this with countries. Some of the lower income countries actually have more happiness than what's considered high wealth, high income countries. There is something to pay attention to, is money does not equate to happiness. And jobs that are super successful do not equate to it. So pay attention to what is creating this.
So let's talk about some things specifically with your vocation where you can do this better, where you can be on not the dark side of this American millionaire equation. And here's the first thing, and this seems so simple, but it's worth kind of really drinking in. Love what you do, love the job that you do, or find a way to be very satisfied in your work. I have a lot of friends like, hey, I'm an auditor, right? I go and I audit cat litter, and that's what I do. And I don't know that I love cat litter. I don't know that I love counting pallets, but if you can find satisfaction in doing your job well and knowing that at the end of the day, what I did had purpose and I did it in an excellent fashion, I think you'll find that you can flip some of that stress to not being a negative and actually be like, you know what, that's pretty good. Today was a good day. I was happy with the way today turned out.
Well, I think about all the career changers. I mean, we have a number of career changers that work for us, but I also we work with fire clients, and I notice how many of them, when they are part of the fire community, they do leave these high-paying jobs to transition into something completely different. It could be education, it could be social media, where they start a podcast or do other things. It is definitely one of those things where you have to ask yourself, I can see it. It's the unspoken part out loud. I'm just going to share it with you guys. Is that they're trying to find something that they can do where they wake up in the morning and they feel like in their own way they're making the world a better place. They have purpose and they wake up. And I worry, even though you can have a great income, if you wake up and, or as Bo put earlier, you have those Sunday dreads where you're chewing on your fingernails, there has to be a better way. So you need to not only have the goal of building wealth, having a good income, a job that creates that with a big shovel, you also need to have something that makes you feel happy, fulfilled, and purposeful, because you might find that that the money that you're making is actually draining you from the core if you don't have all those things aligned.
Another thing when it comes to your work, and this one is something that just means so much to us here in our ecosystem where we live. Love the people that you work with. You can do all kinds of studies, and you recognize that the human beings with whom you spend the most amount of time throughout your life are likely your colleagues and coworkers. You go to work every day, you spend time with these people. You want to make sure that you surround yourself with people who you enjoy, people that you like. Again, if you have those Sunday scares, like, oh man, I've got to see so-and-so at the office, or oh man, I just don't want to go sit next to so-and-so tomorrow for another week. That's naturally going to tend to drive you to not like what it is that you're doing. So find a way to find a job, find a position, find a department where you can surround and appreciate the people with whom you are working.
Yeah, and I also think it's a balance thing because you talk about relationships, you talk about feeling purpose or satisfied. I also think you just have to make sure that the balance aligns with kind of where you want to be in life. I think a lot of us don't ask the question of enough.
Yep.
Because that's the part of, maybe the job you need that actually aligns to what you physically and emotionally want pays a little bit less.
Sure.
So you just need to have that balance of what do you need financially, what actually brings you purpose, and see if there's kind of a marriage that you can create there.
I love it. Now, we would be remiss. We're talking about loving the people you work with and finding a culture that really aligns. Well, that's one of the things we feel like we've done incredibly well here. I think if you look at all the folks we work with, these are 30 of our best friends in the entire world. We love spending time with these people. We love hanging out with those people. If you're someone looking for an environment like that, we're hiring. That's right. This is a shameless plug to let you know we're actually growing the Money Guy team. So you can go to moneyguy.com/careers. We have a number of different job postings. If you're someone who says, man, I love what I do, but I don't love where I'm doing it, or I don't love what I do, I wish I was doing something else, or I don't love the people I'm with, I want to surround myself with people that I do love, go check that out. Who knows, maybe you might be the next member of the Money Guy team. That part was for free.
But I'd be remiss if this is on the social media side. We also always, I would encourage you to go to aboundwealth.com. We always have jobs also on the financial advising side. So pay attention. I think that's important. I mean, we really do try to practice what we preach. We eat our own cooking, as we like to say. So go check it out. Bo, I want to kind of pivot. I want to talk about the depressed or the dark side of being a millionaire is that there is a group out there that you would think this is ridiculous to even say out loud. They're just not good with money.
That's right. Yep. You would think, right, the fact that someone got to millionaire status, the fact that they have a high income, the fact that they've been able to build some sort of wealth immediately suggests, oh, these people get money. They understand it. They're good with it. But you may be surprised that that's not the case. Just because someone has crossed over that 7-figure status does not mean they're actually an astute financial decision maker, and certainly doesn't automatically make them a financial mutant.
The first data point that Daniel created a chart with, I actually had multiple questions for him because I just didn't believe it. And then after he shared with me the data, and he got me to believe it, I then got mad. I mean, because it's a dumb stat.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a stat that should not exist. And here's what we found. I'm going to read it: is families in the top 10% of net worth. That's not like income, because we pick on the high income people all the time. We're talking about top 10% of net worth in America carry an average credit card balance of $12,890. Now, I immediately went to Daniel and I said, Daniel, this $12,890, tell me this is people who are paying, maybe their credit card balance is $12,000 a month because they're so rich and loaded, they're paying off monthly. He goes, no, this is the carry balance that the top 10% has. So it's not any bait and switch or misreading the data. People in the top 10% are actually carrying this type of balance. That blows my mind because we all know we give grace. We give flexibility. Credit card use, I think, is okay because there's a lot of conveniences. There's a lot of protections. There's a lot of rewards. However, credit card debt, no go, works against your success. Don't do it. So to see the top 10%, I mean, what type of example is that setting for the 90% if 10% can't even handle this tool?
It's wild, and it doesn't just stop there. Look at this. 51% of Americans that make over $100,000 claim they're actually living paycheck to paycheck. If their next paycheck does not hit, they're going to miss their bill. 16% of these respondents said that they actually had trouble paying their bills last month. These are folks, just because your income is high, just because you've had some success, does not mean that you're actually making financial decisions the way that you're supposed to be making financial decisions. What happens is these folks who are able to have high incomes and maybe they're just doing their 401k, and because they have a good employer match, the wealth is building, it allows them to fake it. And I am so concerned with how many Americans out there are faking their wealth and not actually doing the things they should be doing when it comes to making financial decisions.
There's one more stat while we're picking on this 100,000 and above income group, is that 54% of them feel like they are financially stressed.
There's the stress again.
Now, here's the thing that I find interesting. When we create content, I walk a tightrope because I realize that we live in an economy right now not the perfect economy. I mean, we're it's not like we're screaming about all-time highs on the bull market and things like that. We're not too far removed from a bear market. I know that there's been a lot of struggles like in the tech sector. So I always am very aware that I don't want to be putting my thumb or pointing fingers at people when there's obviously struggles, because I do think so much of life though is discipline and trying to make sure you understand the concepts of deferred gratification. But anybody who makes $100,000, we all, first of all, the stat that the happiness comes in around 75,000. That first level of wealth is just basically being able to sustain and pay your bills without worried about how I'm going to pay for my food, my house. But once you make $100,000, now we're getting into points where you made decisions. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, you have made decisions on your lifestyle that have put where you are stressed on a month-to-month basis. That's on you. You don't have a income problem. You have a spending problem. You are a hyper consumer instead of being a hyper saver and investor. So I want to just make sure we draw attention to that, because I'm not picking on the people with low incomes. I'm picking on the people who are obviously making decisions to where, and they're repeating this every month where they can't get out of their own way.
Now, here's what's so funny. Imagine that people out there ask, well, how's this happen? Hey, I make $40,000 a year. I just couldn't imagine if I made $100,000 a year, I would never be like that. That would never be my circumstance. And yet, we see this manifest over and over and over. So what's something you can do better? How can you prepare to not allow yourself to fall into this category? The first one is so important. Stop moving the goalpost. We say this all the time. If I could just make $100,000 then, well, what happens is when you get to $100,000, like, oh, well, if I could just make $120,000. Oh, if I could just make if I could just make $200,000, and then the house gets bigger, and the car gets bigger, and then you have the vacation home, and then you have the private school, and then you have the clothes, and then you have the jewelry, and it just spirals out of control. Do a self-assessment. Go ahead right now and dream of that life that you want to live, and attack getting to that lifestyle. But understand, when you get there, don't let it keep expanding. Don't let it keep growing beyond what it should be.
I know when the lifestyle creep is a real thing. And I think once you even start having a level of success, you start going, should I buy a nicer house? Should I buy a nicer car? And I'll give you an experience share. When I built my house here in Nashville, in the south side of Nashville, my builder had a great experience with him. And and a few years later, he texted me, he goes, hey, I got a new subdivision coming in. You ought to really, I can hook you up.
Give you a good deal.
I'd love it, because he enjoyed, I think I was a good customer.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he liked working with me. He's like, so let's do it again. And he was bragging about, some of the other people, and it was going to have a little more land. But I passed, because when I started asking around, I got to know the superintendent pretty well too. And I was like, hey, the 2 or 3 people that are in there, they talk. And he's like, no. And he's like, no, those neighbors. I was like,
it's the reason they're on 3 acres by themselves.
I want to live in a neighborhood where I actually talk to my neighbors. And I think that's the problem, is that if you are not careful, you'll keep buying bigger, you'll buy nicer. By the way, you already pay the phantom higher expenses. If you guys don't know, the nicer the house you live in, the higher the service providers charge.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter what you're doing. I mean, you put a swimming pool in the back of your reasonable house, and then you put a swimming pool, it'd be the exact same swimming pool behind a really big honking mansion, and I guarantee the service contract on the mansion's pool is going to be twice of what the reasonable house pool contract. Just pay attention. Landscaping's going to be that way. Anybody who comes to help you out with any services, I know that these are probably first world problems, but it is a fact that moving the goalpost is going to have more rooms, more furniture, more insurance, more taxes. Pay attention to all that stuff, and then you will understand better what makes me happy. What's enough so that you don't have this influence.
Another way that you can do it better, another way that you can help prevent yourself from falling on the dark side, is understand how to invest appropriately for your stage of life. Far too often, we see folks who've saved their entire career, or they've saved until they hit that magical 47 age and they cross into millionaire status. And all of a sudden they decide, now I got to do something different. Now I got to do something complicated. Now I got to do private equity. Now I got to change the thing that got me to where I am. Understand, based on where you are, how should I be investing? Where should I be putting my dollars? What should I be doing? If you're someone on the very front end of your financial journey, if you're on the front end of building your wealth, don't start majoring in the minors. Focus on low-cost index funds, target retirement index funds. Make it a super easy solution that you can't screw up. And if you are an investor who has built wealth, don't outsmart yourself. Don't overcomplicate things. Don't get too far out on the risk spectrum just because now you can. Understand what's an appropriate strategy, an appropriate investment vehicle for where you are in your stage of life.
I think, we talk about these index target retirement funds. I think they are great as you're starting out because you only have to say, how much can I save each month and invest? When do I need it? It is that simple. But there will come a time where you do have enough success that you should go beyond these index target retirement funds because the tax location of how you hold things in different accounts and different tax structures, that's going to matter. But don't mishear me when I talk about the complexity of moving beyond these index target retirement funds. A very sophisticated, good investment portfolio for a multi-seven-figure portfolio is still going to have index funds. We didn't move away from index funds. I think that's what a lot of people get confused when we talk about the complexity of the planning, the tools that you can bring into the process will add different values and elements because they're going to be doing more. But it doesn't mean you have to go the path that we call the dumb doctor deals, where these are such, what they have sexy sizzle, but they really are so complicated, they're so expensive that they get you in a pickle of a situation to where you're disappointed in their performance. You're upset because they're illiquid. And then you find out that the person making the most money off of these are the people that sold the products to you or put the package deal together. Just pay attention, know what you're getting into. Don't feel like that rich people have to do it this way. And while I was actually building my wealth, I did it this way. You might be surprised there's a lot more overlap between getting wealthy behaviors and staying wealthy behaviors, like buying index funds, using real estate in a smart way, but don't get confused by all the people out there selling products and all these get rich or sexy sizzle packages that will get you in trouble.
Another thing that you can do to protect yourself is just make sure that you're not skipping steps. Make sure you understand, what should I be doing? We have a tried and true process, 9 steps, the financial order of operations. If you want to know about it, you can go download the free deliverable at moneyguide.com/resources, or we do a full deep dive on it at learn.moneyguide.com, where you can work through what should I do with my next dollar. So often people get out of whack. They want to start doing things before it's the right time to do them. So make sure you understand where you are supposed to be on your journey and you're doing steps in the right order so that your wealth can stack through time.
Yeah, it's going to help you with all the discipline, the lifestyle creep, all the things you need. And then I love, if you ever need to keep yourself on track, we have the wealth multiplier. If you look at this thing, if you ever think about going and buying something too fancy, too fast, all you have to do is go download our wealth multiplier, because it's going to allow you to say, hey, instead of spending this dollar or having a car payment, which seems to be the trend based upon social media, of $1,200 a month, what if I was investing $1,200 a month? What would that money be worth for a 28-year-old or for a 36-year-old? I mean, we have it. Go to moneyguy.com/resources. You too can download this.
All right, so we're talking about the dark side of a millionaire. We're talking about what causes people to not do wealth well. We've already said one of those things is that they hate their jobs. We've already said another thing is just not being good with money, not being a solid financial decision maker. This next one, and this is something we've seen, again, manifest in millionaires that are unhappy, that are unfulfilled, that money did not solve the problem they thought it was going to solve. Those millionaires are not generous.
I was shocked by this one too. I gotta tell you, Daniel and I don't come to discussions or debates very often, but this show did kind of, I was like, that's not true. Daniel, go check that again. And then sure enough, here's what I think is interesting. We have this slide, and like I said, I went back with questions on this because Daniel found that Americans making $30,000 or less, they give 6.6% of their income to charity.
What I think is crazy is we know that the average savings rate in this country is like it's right 4 or 5% right now. You know, it went as high as 7% during the pandemic. So Americans under 30K are giving about the national average savings rate. That's interesting, right? Like there's something there to be noted.
Well, the counterpoint to this, because you hear 6.6 and you're like, well, okay, well, people with higher incomes, I'm sure that they're going to at least match. And if they don't match, because I could see the argument, like, well, $30,000, 6% of that, you know, so these people are giving right under $2,000. I mean, if a person's making $100,000 and they're giving, you know, $8,000 a year, yes, it's you know, it's right at what these people are doing, or even $6,000. But what we found is that people who have higher incomes actually are only giving 0.9% of their income. So what if you just did the math on this? The people making less than $30,000 are giving right under $2,000. The people making $100,000 or more were giving right at less than $1,000. That's sad.
Now, hear us out. I want to be clear because I want to make sure it doesn't sound like we are saying, "Oh, well, wealthy people are not generous." That's not what we're suggesting. There are a number of wealthy people out there that are incredibly generous. What we are saying is that not being generous could lead to a decrease in happiness. It could lead to not finding fulfillment. If you're finding your fulfillment in the dollars that are stacking, perhaps there is more to the equation. Perhaps there is something else that you may ought to be thinking about. We're going to talk about in a moment. It's not just money. It's not just how big of a check am I writing.
Well, yeah, I mean, because I am the last person that wants to just beat up on successful people, because I mean, that's who we work with. That's who we reside in that camp. And I don't like it. I already feel like there's so many things out there that are anti-success that I don't want to pile on. But when I see this about generosity, it does frustrate me, especially when, like you just set up, Bo, if you're generous, where does this saying, it's better to give than to receive? I know that sounds great, and it's something we tell our kids around the holidays and so forth. But here's the actual data on this, is that there's a huge study, over 200,000 people, on the impacts of generosity. And what it found out was that people who gave generously were 93%. They showed positive impacts to their happiness, and just a lot of positive benefits to actually making this a deliberate action.
Now, again, I cannot stress this enough. This is not just, okay, how much money am I giving away? How much of the checks am I giving away? But if you are someone who exists, who has a unique skill, a unique knowledge, a unique talent, and by the way, that's all of us, there are probably people in your life that could benefit from your generosity. Maybe generosity, just talking with a coworker. Hey, let me show you how I did this. Maybe it's talking to a younger person, helping share wisdom with them. Maybe it's helping an older person. There are ways that you can be generous, ways that you can pour into the lives of other people. And I think you will be amazed that when you start doing that, when you start recognizing those opportunities, not only will it make you feel better, you will get an actual tactile feel better, you'll actually start appreciating what you have more. You'll start recognizing, man, things are pretty good. I'm not as dissatisfied. I'm not as unhappy. I don't feel as empty. I do feel like I've got purpose and worth, and there's a reason why I'm doing the things that I'm doing every day.
Well, here's what I think: there is a direct express lane between happiness and generosity. We already shared that. That's what the research showed. But the reason why, if you're asking this, if you're a skeptic, is I have found the more you receive, it's all about, did you make this goal of being wealthy to where it's all-consuming, where you lost yourself? I think if you can be selfless and actually be generous, it actually still lets you be a good steward with the resources, but also know who you are, what makes you tick. You're just better with money, because it lets you tie into what's your why, what's your legacy, what makes you work well with and the relationship around you in the world. This is why being generous, because instead of making it all consuming, I'm building so I can have more, it lets you be purposeful and get outside of the money so you can actually think outside of being selfless. And I think that makes you just a better human too.
Now, you've probably noticed, right? Some of these traits kind of build upon each other. They kind of add to one another. They stack one another, right? Like you can kind of see that. Well, this fourth one, I think, is no different. It's sort of the culmination of all of these other pieces, because what we found is that millionaires that do not experience happiness, or the ones who we say fall on the dark side of being a millionaire, they tend to struggle with relationships. And we're using relationships in like the big overarching sense. This may be intimate relationships, coworker relationships, friendships, family relationships. Relationships are not something those that have achieved a certain level of success and are unhappy have figured out how to master.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's one of the things I thought was interesting when we started researching the show is that being wealthy and successful can be isolating.
Mm-hmm.
I know, look, I already gave one anecdotal. It's not scientific, but builder who built my house called me, had a new neighborhood. We went and looked at it, and we found out none of the neighbors talking that, and it's because they live on bigger tracts of property. Mm-hmm. It was 3-acre minimum property versus ours. We're like all around half an acre. Mm-hmm. So you can't help but walk outside to get your mail and talk to 2 or 3 neighbors. Yeah. And that's actually created a sense of community. Whereas I know in these nicer communities, I don't know if it's people just don't even want to know their neighbors, but it just is a natural thing. I think they're more isolated. You're like, oh, that's first world problems. Mm-hmm. But it's a reality. If you're lonely and isolated, I think we are herd animals. Humans like to be around other humans. I know there's going to be a group of you. I have some that are living in my household that are introverts. But still, at some point, we want to be loved. We want to feel connected, have a sense of community. And in a lot of ways, success can make you isolated.
Yeah, there's an interesting study done by Vox that found that low-income Americans spend more time with people overall and spend more time with family, 6 extra days per year, and neighbors 4 more days per year than high-income Americans. So for something happens as our socioeconomic status increases, as our income increases, as our wealth increases, we actually find ourselves spending less time with people. When I think about those 2 stats, less time with family, the people that we love, and less time with friends, the neighbors, the people that we love. So it's something we ought to be mindful of. Are we becoming all consumed in our pursuit of wealth, in our pursuit of success, in our pursuit of making more money, having more money, that we're losing sight of the reason why we're doing that, so that we can do life with the people around us? It's something to be aware of and not allow to be something that strains your relationships.
Well, I just got back from doing spring training with my high school buddies. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen these guys in years. And then you get together and it's like old times because you don't have any of the pretenses. And I think sometimes wealthy people struggle because they also wonder what are people's motivations, what is going on. But it's led to, if you look at the data points, this is always sad to me too, because I take entrepreneurs, because as we all know, that's a successful group of the population. They're 2 times more likely to be depressed. They're 3 times the general population to be addicted to some type of substance. It's not sad to me, because this is supposed to be, you're supposed to be living your best life, having the best relationships. And it seems like this shows me money, wealth, success does not necessarily correlate to fulfillment and happiness. You gotta have some purpose. You gotta actually put a plan to it.
And I think here's how you can do this better, how I can think about this. Number 1, when it comes to relationships, make time for those that you love. Now, I'll be honest, we have so much exciting stuff going on here at the firm and so much exciting stuff going on here with the show. And I'm just naturally driven. I just enjoy work. I love doing it. I could very easily work 18 hours a day, and I would not have any problem with that at all. But I recognize if I did that, I wouldn't be a great husband, and I wouldn't be a great father, and I wouldn't be a great friend, and I wouldn't be involved in my community. So I have to purposely and specifically say, okay, at this time every day, I'm gonna stop working. I'm gonna go home. This is family time. You have been able to implement some sort of systems or traits that have allowed you to become successful and build wealth as you get to millionaire status. So you've shown that you have an affinity for systems and achieving goals. I'm just arguing that one of the goals that you ought to have if you are motivated, if you are driven is, I'm going to make a goal to purposely spend time with folks that I love, folks that I care about, folks that I want to be around.
I have an experience here that I think will be somewhat well received because it really will give context to some things. Is that because this is the part about wealth and relationships. When I was in middle school, my father lost his job. Now, this is the job that was paying well for my family, where we were very comfortably in the middle class, had a company car. Had lots of benefits. I remember we used to go do vacation in Augusta, Georgia, because my dad was a sales manager for both the Atlanta and the Augusta, Georgia, and they stayed at the Holiday Inn. They had cable TV. We didn't have cable TV at the house.
That's how you know it was a nice vacation.
And it had a swimming pool in the backyard. It was high time living. You know, that's why I saw Clash of the Titans at least 26 times on like the same trip, because that's how HBO worked back then. But then my dad lost his job in middle school. When I was going 7th and 8th grade, the company just completely got out of the division. And he lost the company car. It was the hardest time economically for my family. My mom will still talk about that it was such a struggle for them. That's why, you know, when I tell the funny stories of recycling soap, where my parents' vacations for that 2 years was going on timeshare presentations so we could get free vacations and things like that. But here's the cut through all the noise of my parents' stress, the anxiety of not having enough money. My dad driving around jalopy that he was keeping running, they bought for less than $1,000. Was that when I look back on my childhood, and this is really important because my dad has been gone since I was in my mid-20s. He passed away. Is that the best time of my childhood was actually when my parents were the poorest. You know why? Dad was there.
Because you were together.
And that's the thing that I think we have to clear the air on, is saying that, look, just like time in the market is important, you got to have that time component to get the compounding growth and everything. Time with loved ones is what is going to create the depth, the relationship, the memories. I mean, because when you lose your father in your mid-20s, you know what helps get you through it? Having all those memories and having those periods. But I've always really internalized the poorest time for my parents was the happiest time for me as a kid. And it probably goes for a lot of kids out there, that they're not paying attention to what cars the parents drive, the houses they live in. It's really how loved they feel, the sense of community, and then how healthy the relationship is in that house.
I love it. Another thing that you can do that's in that same vein is figure out how to maintain a community. Now, one thing I love, and someone just said this in the chat, and I think it's so great. We have a community here. Every Tuesday at 10 a.m., you guys come and hang out with us and you interact. And what I think is awesome is if you bought one of our courses or use one of our tools, you know we have a private financial mutant group. And I love seeing you guys interact on there. Hey, I've got this problem. I've got this issue. I've got this question. I'd love for you guys to weigh in. And there is a sense of community, even though it's virtual, even though it's not like next door neighbors talking. I think it is awesome. If you can find ways to do that, I think you'll be amazed at how much sweeter life can be. You said something that I think is so awesome, Brian. You went to spring training with your group of buddies from high school. I mean, high school was a long time ago for you. And yet, you've been able to maintain that. I've got the same thing. I've got 3 best friends in the whole world. We all went to school together, and we still do a trip together every year. If you can find ways to maintain those communities in your life, it will help recenter you on those things that really matter and not get lost in the hustle and bustle of trying to chase wealth, trying to chase money.
You know, we talked about, and I've talked, we've both bragged about that. Our poor wives and are the spouses that have to probably put up with more than anybody else because we're the very unique characters to live with. I do think it's important to, if you want to do it well, choose your partner wisely. This is somebody you're going to spend a lot of time with. You're going to make a lot of financial decisions. Whatever mistakes or struggles they have will also become part of your struggles. So just have good communication. Make sure you have those discussions before you start talking about engagement. You know, do all the heavy lifting. Don't let it just be, does that person make my heart, go flippity flop, and and other exciting things that happen when you're in that early part of a relationship. Actually think about what does long-term success look like and choose your partner wisely.
Yeah, I want to be very clear because if you're seeing the slide right now, it actually says choose your partners wisely. I was like, why on earth do we put that up there? With the people with whom you interact, it means even if you go, like, so you talked about the intimate, the marital relationship, the spousal relationship, right? It's also, hey, if you're going to go into business with someone, make sure that you're choosing your partner wisely. If you're going to commit to something long-term with another human being, make sure that you're choosing that wisely, because a lot of your happiness and a lot of your fulfillment will be tied up in how well you get along with that person. Brian, it's been great doing this with you for as many years as we've been doing it. There's a bunch of other knuckleheads in my life who would have driven each other crazy by now, but for some reason, this thing works. So if you can make those decisions right on the front end and not hastily rush into it, not make a flippity-floppity decision like Brian said, then you're going to set yourself up for success over the long term.
I want to close it out with something I couldn't help myself. This got a collective groan from the content team when I brought it up. I was like, cue up the Jimmy John sign, because Bo and I were in McDonough, Georgia, and he was so excited they got a Jimmy John. And I remember the first time I went to the bathroom at Jimmy John, and I found this, but it encapsulates perfectly a good closing.
It does.
Here.
It's great.
Is that because I have throughout this episode, because we're talking about the dark side of being a millionaire and how empty wealth can be if you just don't understand your why and your purpose. And there's this sign that's in a lot of Jimmy John's, the sandwich shop, of course. It's all across the country. How much is enough? And I think the content team was worried I was going to read this whole thing. I'm not.
I want to be clear. We're still nervous it's going to happen. We're
I'm
all
not
kind of
going to read
expecting
it. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I am going to set it up, and then I'm going to read 2 lines.
Okay.
First of all, there's a wealthy investment banker, American, because we're talking about the dark side of being an American millionaire if you're not careful. He goes down to Mexico and he's just going on a fishing thing. Well, as he's at the dock, he sees this fisherman pull up and he has 2 huge tuna. And he's like, wow, those are some beautiful fish. How long did it take for you to do that? And the fisherman's like, not too long. He goes, and of course the American super successful guy is like, why didn't you get more? If it didn't take you long, you should go get fish even more, fill up the entire boat. And he goes, so since it didn't take you long, what do you do with your time? This is what the American asked the fisherman. What do you do with your time? And here it is. I'm going to read this. This is the first one. The Mexican fisherman said, I sleep late, fish a little, play with my children, take a siesta with my wife, Maria, stroll into the village each evening where I sip wine and play guitar with my amigos. I have a full and busy life. So, of course, the American's like, yeah, but let me tell you, you have so much capacity. You have so much ability to fish for more, get more beautiful tuna in there. Why don't you, not only you could fish, you could hire a whole fleet of fishermen to work underneath you, and you could build up all this wealth and success.
Build and
to
scale.
the point. And the fisherman was like, well, why would I want to do that? He's like, so you could be wealthy. And he's like, well, how long would that take? The fisherman was like curious. He's like, how long would that take? Like 15 to 20 years. And then the fisherman asked the question that I think gives so much purpose. He goes, okay, so if I build up all this money, I take the 15 to 20 years, what's the why? Why would I do all this? And then the investment banker, the American millionaire, dark side of this, looks at him and goes, well, so the American said, then you'd retire, move to a small coastal fishing village where you would sleep late, fish a little, play with your kids, take the siesta with your wife, stroll to the village in the evening, sip wine, and play your guitar with your amigos. There is so much, and this goes back full circle, very Seinfeld-esque, back to my childhood. Happiest time of my life as a kid was when my dad and my mom were broke as a joke because my dad had lost his job. Kids don't pay attention to that stuff. They know how much love is in the house, not how much money. Now, definitely money helps. Don't mishear me on that. But pay attention to the people you love. Pay attention, be purposeful about every second you're on this planet, and just make it happen. Try to make sure you understand what does wealth do for you, what does it not do, and what is actually the why of your life, so you can all bring it together and have that full abundance that we want to create for you.
Money is not bad. Being wealthy is not bad, but you have to recognize that money and wealth is a tool. It's not the goal. It's the thing that allows you to do the things that you want to do on your terms. Make sure you approach it that way. Don't fall into one of these traps that millionaires on the dark side fall into. Be the other version. Be the version that's not the dark side of millionaire. Be the bright side of the American millionaire. Be the one that sets the standard for what a happy, fulfilled, wealthy individual should look like.
By the way, I see the entire content team was laughing. I think they were probably laughing because I could have read that quicker than my storytelling. That's what y'all, I nailed it, didn't I? Y'all are so mean. So mean. I put up with this. It just cracks me up. This is all because I was out running around with the IT guy instead of doing the pre-show meeting with you guys because we didn't get to cover that part. So guys, I'm your host, Brian Preston, Mr. Bo Hansen, the rest of the content team. We're out. We'll talk to you soon.